Hi, I'm Dr. Kelly Kessler, and I am the host of the podcast, Rewiring Health. This podcast is devoted to giving you expert information around nervous system regulation, subconscious mind reprogramming, and a variety of health topics so that you can optimize your life. Stop feeling burnt out, overwhelmed, in pain, and start living your life where you can remain successful without compromising your health. The never-ending pressure of holding it all together and showing the world a perfected version of yourself is just one of the deep struggles that comes along bulimia. In this episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Sarah Lee, who shares her incredible journey of recovery and how she transformed her past challenges into her purpose. Certified eating disorder coach Sarah Lee has been in practice since 2016, possessing 4 professional coaching certifications. She helps many people, yet specializes in female adolescents and believers of Christian faith. Before entering the mental health field, Sarah held various leadership positions in banking corporate world for over 18 years. Immediately after leaving banking, she began working alongside her CFO for his radio broadcasting company. She brings both her professional background and her own lived experience into her coaching practice. While in her 20s, Sarah secretly struggled with bulimia for almost 7 years. On the outside, presented to all as a high-functioning and successful individual in most aspects of her life. However, the physical damage began to catch up with her, and after major medical scare, she went straight into recovery and found her freedom from bulimia in 2006. This was such an incredible conversation I had with Sarah, and I'm so grateful that she shared her story on this platform. And I know it will bring so much benefit to so many who take a listen to this. So without further ado, here's Sarah Lee. Welcome back to another episode of Rewiring Health. I'm so excited to be joined by Sarah Lee. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here with you, Kelly.
Yeah, so we connected and, we had a conversation a few weeks ago and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to record this episode because there's going to be so many gems that come out. And just like when we were talking, we're like, we should have been recording this. So here it is. Now we can finally dive into it. And like I said, this is just going to be such a great conversation. So I'm looking forward to it. So what I want to get right into, because I love to hear people's stories of what your journey was, because everybody has a story of what, things that they go through in life that are absolute struggles, and then they don't realize where it's taking them. So do you mind sharing your journey and what brought you to where you are today and what you do today?
Yes, absolutely. I don't mind at all. So I was in my 20s. I was very successful early on in my career. I was in the world of banking, and just found that it fit me like a glove. I tend to love numbers, and I also love to serve others. So there was this combination for banking that really fit me. But in addition, that part of my life. I also had a son. So my son was born when I was 23. And during my pregnancy, Kelly, in my mind at the time, gained way too much weight, right? I remember him being born and he was just under 7 pounds. And literally, I had one of my first thoughts around just not liking my body and trying to figure out, like, how is he so small and I gained so much weight? And it was then I set out on finding a diet that was going to work for me. And I tried a lot of different things, even that during that time, FinFin was on the market and I was trying to get my hands on that. I felt very desperate. And then one day coming home from work, I passed by a Weight Watchers and I was like, okay, maybe this will work. And so I walked in Weight Watchers and became a member right away. And it really drew me in because you're counting points, which AKA could be calories in a sense, but it's a mixture of things that come up with the point system. And you weigh in every week, you go to a group meeting. So there's like this community and social aspect, and you actually get cheered on, at least you did back then, when you got on the scale and you lost weight that week. So there was this combination of Weight Watchers for me that included numbers. In addition, this cheering me on and social aspect of actually losing weight. My perfectionistic side, which I know you talk a lot about on your podcast, definitely rose to the top for me quickly. And there was no negotiating. I stuck to my points, and that was it. And I did that for over 6 months, Kelly. I was at then like the lowest point thing, and I hit my goal, lifetime goal weight, and all this kind of stuff. And then one day I went out for a happy hour with a bunch of work people, and they were passing around chocolate cake. And I remember calculating in my head, oh my gosh, this is like a whole day's worth of Weight Watcher points. I've never gone over my points. This is going to be ruinous. And everybody was like cheering me on, like, take a bite, you've done great, you've lost all that pregnancy weight, all those comments. So I took a bite of this chocolate cake, and I remembered like this weird like place where I felt out of my body, and like I needed to eat all the chocolate cake.
Mhm.
And to fast forward, that evening, I decided to purge for the first time. I didn't even know anything about eating disorders, by the way. I didn't know anything, but
Mhm.
I just knew like I went over my Weight Watcher points. I feel super guilty. This is going to ruin everything, and I have to eliminate. And it was then, and I remember afterwards, I remember thinking, okay, that'll never happen again. Don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it took hold of me. And I struggled then for 7 years secretly with bulimia.
Mhm.
And I felt very stuck in the vicious cycle into the outside world. I was a single mom, making it happen, co-parenting with my son's father. I had a great career. I got lots of compliments all the time on how I looked so great, because my body never got to a place where people maybe worried I'm sick.
Mhm.
Instead, they thought I looked wonderful. And behind closed doors, I struggled. And just, fast forwarding more, I finally went into recovery, because my son found me passed out on the floor. And I always get emotional when I talk about this.
Uh,
He has no memory of that. He was 7 years old. It may be a repressed memory. I don't know.
mhm.
But I remember waking up to him crying over me and his little glasses all fogged up, and just thinking, what am I doing? That
Oh.
I've got to change.
Mm.
And so, with some health issues, which it had to be everything but my eating disorder, right? I blamed everything but my eating disorder,
Totally.
and
Mhm.
nobody knew I was struggling. Nobody.
Mhm.
It was that moment I was like, something's got to change. And I was actually rushed to the hospital. And the next day, I dropped to my knees and begged God to help me, that I couldn't do it on my own. So it was this combination of my son, my health, and giving myself over to the Lord that put me into recovery. And I've now been recovered 17 years.
Wow. Oh
I
my
left
God.
the banking world after 18 years of being in banking, and have been coaching now for almost 7 years, helping other people break free too.
Oh my God. Like as you're talking, I'm like getting goosebumps because it's just like like you can almost feel how you felt in that moment. It's like that external validation you've gotten all along, telling that you're worthy if you weigh this weight, you're worthy if you restrict, or you're worthy if you look this certain way. And it's like that, it just embeds in our hearts. And then it's also that like the guilt and shame of you are showing, you're feeling this, what the truth is, and then the world is now encouraging you to do something that is deep down harming you. It's just a complete battle, and then all the while trying to be a mom on top of that. It's like just all the worlds collide, and it's just, oh my gosh, just it's just like my heart breaks for you, for where you
Mhm.
were in that moment, because I can very much relate to that in a very different way. And it's like, that trap of how you feel like you are completely stuck. And I really believe it's like, unless you've experienced that, it's not like, I think sometimes people like, oh, it's a lack of self-control, or it's like that. It is nothing like that. It is that you literally are, you feel helpless. Like you feel like
Yes,
you can't help yourself. Like
right.
it is like
That's right.
this force within you that you can't overcome in that moment, and it's like you feel powerless.
You
And
do. Well, it
yeah,
morphs, right, Kelly? It morphs into a place in that moment with the chocolate cake. For
yeah.
me, it was about ruining this streak I had with food
Mm.
and weight. But what happened was that anxiety I felt in that moment by purging. And I just like to talk, I don't want to trigger any of the listeners, but I like to talk very frankly, because I feel like it's needed to lift the shame.
Mhm.
So in that moment, after I had self-induced vomiting, I felt a relief. And
Mhm.
that relief
Yeah.
became very addictive. And the best way I can explain it to people that have never had this or battled with it,
Mhm.
it's like you're so tightly wound, you have this anxiety in you, it feels like you can't breathe. And then after this behavior, you feel lighter, you can breathe again.
Yeah.
And there's also this place of shame because you're like, I know this isn't good for me. I know this isn't something that I should be doing, but it
Yeah.
becomes a very addictive cycle, just like substances can be for people.
100%. Yes, and you're so right. Like the way you describe it, that's so what you experience. And I've shared my struggles with bulimia too, and it's like for what helped me really understand, because like when I was doing that, I felt like there's something wrong with me. But what helped me is understand the science behind it. And when you talk about that relief for with bulimia, the purge is actually a release of dopamine, and that dopamine is that reward cycle. So you are actually getting rewarded in your brain for something that is maladaptive, and it is going to hinder your health, but you get a reward. So it's that cycle of like what you cognitively know what you should be doing versus what your brain is saying, no, that you're getting rewarded for this. And
I
yes, it's
know.
such a battle. Yeah.
It is. It really, really is. And then there's the physical relief too, because, as I got going with bulimia, there
Yeah.
was major binges. So my cycle was, I was very restrictive and I'd go back to my Weight Watcher points, right? Lowest points possible. And I do
Yeah.
that for like a week or a
Mhm.
week and a half. And then the urge would come over me. And at the time, it felt very like something was possessing me. I would
Mhm.
even physically shake, trying to surf the urge, and I would shake. I literally remember being in a Walmart line and I had this bag full of all these foods I was going to binge on. And I was shaking because the checkout lady was moving really slowly. And I was like, I just want to get home and eat all this food. And I remember that so vividly,
Yeah.
that it was like my drug. I'm like, I need to do this. And I was physically, so there is the psychological, the brain chemical piece, but there's
Yeah.
also this physical component to it. And
Totally.
you bring up, I want to say this because I know some of your story by following you,
Mhm.
but with bulimia too, there's some misunderstanding because there's two types of compensatory behaviors.
Mhm.
There's the compensatory behavior that's the most well known that we're talking about, which is the self induced vomiting.
Yeah.
But there is a non purging compensatory behavior, and people don't necessarily associate that with bulimia a lot of times. But I believe, Kelly, if I'm right, you mentioned to me, or I've heard you say that you used exercise quite
100%.
often as a
Absolutely.
compensatory behavior.
That's how I
And so,
started. Yeah.
okay, so some
Mhm.
people don't realize that
Yeah.
when they think of bulimia, they just think of binging and self induced vomiting.
Mhm.
But there's also an element of using other behaviors to
Yeah.
compensate for what you feel is a binge or what is
Mhm.
actually defined as a binge.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up too, because what I found, I don't know if you also experienced exercise as a way of
Mhm.
purging, but what I found is that I was an athlete and it was a very slippery slope gray line. I did not even recognize I had an eating disorder until I was purging by vomiting. I literally, the exercise, like, no, I'm an athlete. This is what I do. I exercise, for 6 hours a day. Doesn't everybody who's an athlete, and like,
Right,
same thing, like,
right.
was getting like wow, you're so disciplined, oh my gosh, you're in such good shape. Like I was getting so much reward for that and praise that it's like it just perpetuates it, and you identify as that person of like, this is who I am, so I have to hold on to this identity.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So
That's right.
true.
And I know we can get frustrated with the
Mhm.
culture and those around us, but it's just a lack of understanding,
Yeah.
And if you haven't, I always say those of us that struggle with it, eating disorder, right? We took it to the extreme. We
Mhm.
took the diet to the extreme. We took the exercise to the extreme. We took it to the extreme. We dove into the deep end of the pool,
Mhm.
right? But so many people in our culture are, obsessed with diet, obsessed with their body, not happy, all of these things, but they're not necessarily in the deep end,
Yeah.
right? They may be like in the middle or the kiddie pool. So when they say things like this, it's not to try to reinforce some behavior that you have, it's
Mhm.
just they don't get it.
Yeah. 100%. Absolutely. Yes. And yeah, it was like no malice behind it, but it's like we all have our own lens. And so when we are living with that day in and day out, you're seeing and hearing things through your own lens. So even though they may think like, wow, I wish I could exercise like her, they don't know the struggles. And there's a lot of secrecy. And like, I know you talk about this. I would love for you to just share that too. Like the secrecy, the privacy, the hiding. Can you talk about that in your journey? Because that's such a huge component, especially with bulimia. And I think
Yes.
many of us struggle in silence, and it needs to be changed because that's part of the problem.
It
Hmm.
is part of the problem. And that's one reason, and we'll kind of get to this later in the podcast. But,
Hmm.
this one reason that my partner and friend, fellow coach, we developed a program just for bulimia because we are finding it's like I knew it because that's my lived experience. But now doing this work for almost 7 years and working with all types of eating disorders, I find that there is the most shame with bulimia because of the compensatory behavior, specifically the self induced vomiting.
Yeah.
I think for, with some of the other eating disorders, we're more open about talking about emotional eating and binge eating in our culture. The restrictive end of the behavior sometimes can be control and disciplined or something like that. But you can't put a silver lining or spin on the self-induced vomiting, if that makes sense. So when I was struggling, no way did I want to identify with this. I thought I really looked at it as like honestly a monster that would just take over me sometimes.
Yeah.
That if I could just, I had it in my mind, if I could just stick to my Weight Watcher points all the time, everything would be fine. And even when so nobody knew I struggled. And even when I decided to go into recovery at that moment, there was probably only 3 to 4 people in my very close circle that knew.
Hmm.
And then when I felt a couple years in very strong in my recovery, still nobody knew.
Hmm.
Still, when I felt really strong in my recovery and I was living a recovered life, I could not speak of this. I remember one time sitting around the table with my husband's family, and he's just so proud of me and everything I've overcame. And we were in a deep conversation. And he brought up, he's like, well, Sarah struggled with an eating disorder and she's overcame it. I remember I'm free at this moment, feeling humiliated. And when we
Wow.
left, he could tell something was wrong with me. And he's like, what's the matter? I said, I wish we wouldn't have told them.
Hmm.
And he said, I'm sorry. Like he felt terrible, right? But then I thought, well, it is okay. I have overcame it. But even then, I was so ashamed. It wasn't until Kelly, I decided and had the calling placed on my heart that I wanted to help others. And I went and found how to get certified,
Yeah.
how to, build my own practice, how to do all this. That I became quote unquote out there with it.
Hmm.
And I remember the first time I decided to post it to Facebook, and it was on National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. And I
Hmm.
decided,
Yeah.
okay, I'm just going to put like the hotline out there for Nita and
Hmm.
observe the week. And I was scared of doing that.
Hmm.
So it took
Yeah.
me a long time just because I was fearful of what others would think of me, especially because they had a image of me as very successful in my career, being able to hold my whole life together. One of my very best friends that have been best friends for a while, when I finally came out with it, I'm talking like 7 years ago, right? Like 10 years into recovery,
Yeah.
I came out with it and started telling my personal story to release shame. My best friend, I remember, texted me. She's like, I would have never guessed this about you.
Mhm.
Here are her words. She said, I
Yeah.
would have never guessed this about you. I thought you and your life were perfect.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh
And
my
I
God.
remember getting that text from her, and I remember thinking, yeah, that was my goal, wasn't it?
Mhm. Yeah.
But I wasn't perfect. I was living in shame and guilt and shaking at checkout center, the checkout line at Walmart because I needed to binge and purge. And I was stuck in a vicious cycle, but even those close to me never knew.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the most profound thing is like you have the closest people, and like I can very much relate to what you're saying, the closest people in your life, and you did such a good job of holding it all together, creating this persona that the world would see, even though you're deeply struggling, and it is absolutely draining to live like that. It's so draining to make sure that every little piece is just so that you hide and protect this person inside you and this feeling inside you. It's so draining to be like that. And thank you for sharing how you were saying, coming out as far as sharing this to the world, because there's so many layers to that. And it does take a very long time individual process. Like we all have to come, and disclose that as we're comfortable, but it is so hard. And I experienced that the same thing. I mean, it was literally 15 years after I went through it. And my best friends are like, I had no idea either. So I can very much relate. I mean, literally, I remember making my first post too on social media, and I'm like, well, here we go. And it was freaky. It was absolutely freaky. But then there was, I don't know if you noticed, it's like a very therapeutic part to it when you started.
100%. It was
Yeah.
like, wow, it's out there. And then of course the
Yeah.
response from people was like, you're so strong to share this. It's very like
Yes.
positive, and it felt
Yep.
like a relief to
Hmm.
finally share something I didn't even know I needed to share.
Hmm.
That part of me was like, well, that's something I dealt with in my past. It was a
Hmm.
struggle I had in my past,
Yeah.
but when I felt pulled to help others because I get it,
Hmm.
I've been there. And you're talking about the energy it takes. It made me think of, Kelly, this goes along with shame too, of when you feel that urge to purge and you're in social settings, right?
Hmm.
Or
Hmm.
you're out and about and you end up giving into the behaviors in places that make you feel even more shame, like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, I'm in the back of a convenience store right now doing this is insanity. Like, if anybody could see me right now,
Yeah.
this is really what, like, it just really messes with you and makes you want to keep it even more secret.
Totally. And it's just that feeling of being alone, like, because if you're the only one who knows this, you know those dark moments. No one else knows those dark moments. And it just makes you feel like you're very alone in the world. So it almost makes you put even more of a protective wall up, because you feel very vulnerable in those moments. And it's so hard to get out of that, like to start moving in a direction where there's not such a gap between what the world sees and what you are experiencing.
Yeah.
And I just want to share something as you were saying that, because I know we brought this up last time we talked, but one thing too that makes it really, really tough about being open and being vulnerable, and this is why I love having a platform like this where we can talk about this, but when you go on social media, and I know we said this, is that you can't even say eating disorder, because you will get either flagged or your content won't be shared out as much. You can't say bulimia. There's certain things you cannot say. So even though you're trying to share a message of, positivity, healing, hope, you're not even allowed to say it on social media because of all these things. And I've experienced this when I've tried to share posts. I know you were talking about that. And that is
Yep.
such a frustrating thing when you're an advocate for people to heal and have hope and getting out of this, and you can't even share. And that's it's a big issue in the shame
Huge
again.
issue.
Yep.
Huge issue.
Yeah.
And you're right, it did have, I'm still dealing with that on my
Mhm.
coaching Facebook page.
Yeah.
It looks like I do have some type of a shadow ban on me,
Mhm.
because my organic reach isn't as high anymore ever since I started really boldly talking about bulimia. And perhaps your listeners can even tell by tuning in right now, but I tend to be diplomatic and very positive in my words and my scope. And it's all about hope and pursuing recovery. And if
Yeah.
I could do it, they could do it. If you could do it, they could do it. I never thought I could get out of it,
And
nor did I think I really wanted to. So that's always a weird place too, because you're like, I
mhm.
kind of don't want to do this, but what's going to happen
Yeah.
if I stop doing this? Right.
Totally. Mhm.
But yeah, as I boldly talked about it on Facebook, I did get, flagged and some violations of, was it special issue violations, but I'm working on getting it like back to normal, but it's really frustrating because you want to help people and there's just certain topics that get limited.
And that's such a shame, because again, here we are, there's people who are trying to help people who are already struggling in secrecy, and now the message is being hindered from getting to the people that need to hear it most. And that's such a frustrating thing. So it's like this still goes on, where there is this, governing bodies are hindering people from getting to the resources that they need to. And so I just wanted to
I know. You're
Share
getting
that.
heated. I feel you're getting heated right now because here's the other thing.
Yeah.
If we look back, I think it was, like 2020, where definitely the whole world turned upside down, right? Going into 2021, Meta, specifically Instagram and Facebook, started to get very scrutinized for
Mhm.
a lot of things. One of the things that Instagram, and there's lots of news articles about this, but one of the things Instagram was, not fondly looked upon is they felt like they were advocating eating disorders, right? So I think that this is just my opinion. I don't have anything backing this up, everybody, but in my opinion, I feel like they tried to make good strides in saying, okay, we're not advocating eating disorders, so we're going to put these parameters in place to flag these issues and get them minimized in people's feed. But I feel like that went all wrong. That's why I'm getting heated.
Yeah.
Why it was looked upon as Instagram specifically, promoting eating disorders. It was the
Mhm.
content
Mhm.
around the pictures of certain types of bodies.
Mhm.
There's still content around diets that
Mhm.
are very restrictive and certain challenges and all these kind of things. So it's not that, hey, Kelly and Sarah are out there talking about bulimia so that you can heal. It's like, no, it's because the diet ads and the restrictive
Yeah.
mindset, it's diet culture. And
Mhm.
so there's some kind of miss there.
Yeah. Yes. And that's what it is. It's like, and these are just like words that are getting flagged. They're not, there's not even like the messages behind it. If like you read the message, it's very obvious that there's this sense of hope and healing and, advocacy for people to live free from eating disorders. But yeah, it's literally like a
Yeah.
word gets flagged and then your whole message is gone.
Well,
And
that's why, I
yeah.
mean, your podcast is fabulous, right? No, we can't
Oh,
get
thanks.
flagged for saying anything we want to on this podcast.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all, yeah. I mean, as long as it's promoting health and healing, which it
That's
is,
right.
that's it, And so it is, I think it's important to bring that up because if for someone who's listening and you're feeling in that dark, secretive place where you can't show the world one thing, like, and you feel like you're alone and there can be that you're not going to see a lot of messages about that on social media because it's not allowed to get to you, that there are many people that experience this. So find the right resources and understand that there are people that are willing to help. You may have to dig a little bit harder, unfortunately, because of this. But this is why, I love having you on right now, because here's a resource that if you're struggling with this, here it is,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
now it can lead you to other avenues where you can really start diving to get help. And it's like, I wish conversations like this happened 20 years ago so I could have benefited from it. But,
Me too.
yeah, exactly. The beauty of it is that now you can take these struggles, use them as your strengths to help the past version of yourself. And that's the most beautiful thing that you can do. So
Yeah,
I
I
love
agree. The
that.
past version of yourself and others. And I'll say for, all your listeners too, the role of the certified coach. And I
Mm,
want to emphasize certified because right now the um, coaching in general is not regulated.
mm,
So if you want to work with a coach, me or somebody else, you want to make sure they're certified and specifically by the Carolyn Costin Institute. And most of the coaches, I'd say over 90%, are all recovered.
mhm,
And the other percentage usually has loved somebody that has gone through it and recovered. So there's a real lived experience
mhm,
plus the rigorous training of becoming certified to help somebody. And the role of the coach is very different than that of a therapist or dietitian.
mhm,
We are very action oriented, goal oriented, and we're in the moment with you. So not only are we helping weekly in session, maybe with an eating challenge or talking about your thoughts and shifting those, or we're really trying to focus on that behavioral change. But we're the person, Kelly, that if you're in the bathroom and you're about to purge, you text us in the
mm,
moment,
mm,
and we get it, and we're also
yeah.
trained to help you in those moments. So when you're talking about reaching out for help, there's a whole slew of eating disorder coaches out there now that can serve a different role.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I know when I was going through it, that was like very scary of like, because I felt like it was like all or nothing. You were either being admitted or you were not getting help. And that's where like I never sought out help and I really should have. And because of that, so I love that there are coaches like you who are that person who's kind of in the middle where you can get that help that you need without feeling like your entire life is just going to be dominated by someone
Yeah.
telling you what to do, because it's very scary to relinquish control.
Yeah.
And having someone who's been there, understands it, especially with something so deeply impactful, is absolutely tremendous to have that in someone like that in your corner. And
It
so
is, and it releases the shame, right? Because they know,
totally,
like, I'm not gonna judge them. I understand it
exactly.
firsthand, and
Mhm.
that is significant in the healing process.
Oh my gosh, completely. Absolutely. One thing, as a, you were talking before, and I want to come back to this, is the sense of worth, because this is something that it transforms as you go from in the thick of it to as you heal. Can you talk about your journey of self-worth from when you were in the thick of your eating disorder to where you are today, and how that has changed and how you've cultivated self-worth?
What a beautiful question.
Oh.
When I look back, when I struggle with my eating disorder or that phase of my life, so in my 20s, a lot of my worth was based on what I could achieve and
Mhm,
what I look like. And I saw that as a way to receive love
mhm,
and admiration. And that made me feel somewhat safe and okay in this world. But as I have evolved and matured and lived a recovered life, I now find my worth more in my connections with
mhm,
people and how I'm giving back to the world, how I seek to really take care of myself when I get out of balance and I'm noticing that and I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do now. My priorities are just completely different. Sure, do I still have that place in me? I think it's in my nature, it's my traits of being like high achieving. I certainly do want to look my best, but no longer at the price of my soul. I
mhm,
will no longer try to achieve or look a certain way or be a certain size at the price of my soul.
mhm.
What is important to Sarah, starting with myself and what my values really are and how I connect with others, that's top priority.
Oh, huge. I love that. And I just love how you talk about your soul, because there's such a difference. And it's like, I don't know if you noticed, but it's like, then when you're living in that, it's very ego driven. And then now you have, like, when you're soul led, it's a whole different feel. Like, you can still be a high achiever, but then you understand that what matters most is your heart, your well-being,
Right.
your mental, emotional, and physical capacity. And it's just such a huge difference and transition from that. And I just love how
Yep.
you bring that in,
Yep.
because it's such a different feel when you're leading life soul led versus leading life ego led.
It
Huge
is, and
difference.
it's a
Mhm,
choice, and it can be. I needed some
mhm,
environmental changes. When I loved banking, but everything. I mean, every morning I'd wake up and I had a high position, so I'm pulling reports every morning. And where is my district ranked? And
mhm,
this and this and this, and it was very performance and numbers driven and very competitive. And it was difficult, I think, for me, even after I left my eating disorder behind, to be more soul led because I was in an environment that didn't necessarily nourish that
mhm,
or cultivate that. I'm not saying it can't be done, like for me in the big corporate banking world,
mhm,
but it was challenging because where I was at most of the time was had a different culture and feel to it. So it
mhm,
wasn't until I trusted my heart, decided to leave banking, take
mhm,
some risk, right? Because I made great money, take some risk, do something different, that I became more soul led and more in touch with myself. So I just want to bring that up because I think some people are feeling like, well, I'm trying so hard to do it this way, but I can't. Well,
mhm.
sometimes it can really be environment
Yeah.
and those that are around you. And I know it's very challenging to make those kind of big changes,
Mhm.
um, but it certainly helps in that journey.
Absolutely. Yes. And I just love that. And it's like taking that leap of faith. It's like we can move in fear, we can move in faith. And it's like not downplaying the challenge of that. It's absolutely hard to make those big changes in life, but you often, those big changes lead to the most beautiful transformations, and you can see it time and time again, and it's just, that's absolutely beautiful. But it's very easy to get stuck in that kind of corporate trap of feeling like, especially when you have money and you have more demands, the more successful you become, the more you feel like you're stuck in it. Like, I've worked so hard, how do I leave this? And it can be very easy to get trapped in that. And so it does take incredible courage to say, like, I'm worth more than this. Like, I need to take care of myself and
That's
remove
right.
myself from this.
That's
So
right.
yeah.
That's right.
And
And it helps to have support. Like my husband was really
mhm,
supportive, and so it helps to have that support system,
mhm.
behind you when you're making those big changes.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Absolutely. And um that's everything. Really just having the right people in your corner and just really evaluating that, like, who can I trust? Who's going to be there for me? Who can I really have an open, authentic conversation with? And that's such a huge
Right.
thing. For someone,
Right.
it's often, there's such a big thing with like the questions we ask ourselves. For someone who's listening to this and is in that really dark, secretive place, doesn't know where to turn, where can they start as far as like what questions can they start asking themselves to bring some awareness to themselves?
Love that. I think just asking, two things. Sometimes with eating disorders, I find that the consequences are more motivating than reward. I
Mhm.
know it was for me. So, for instance, when I
Yeah.
said my story earlier, my health concerns, what I was doing for my son, the consequences that may come after that. That was motivating for me to change. So when I say this question, it is meant to just understand what could be a driver for somebody. But as you're in that dark place listening right now, asking yourself, what is your life going to look like if you continue down the path you are right now?
Mhm.
In a couple years, in 5 years, like,
Mhm.
what do you think is going to happen if you don't decide to start pursuing recovery?
Mhm.
And I know it's super scary, but I'll tell my clients a lot of times, you can trust me till you can trust yourself, right? So
Mhm.
I think asking, if I continue this, what is my life going to look like?
Mhm.
And then also asking yourself, what is actually important to you?
Mhm.
And how does that line up with your eating disorder?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
most of the time, people are going to find, like, yeah, that doesn't really line up, because a lot of times people will say, well, health is important to me, having a healthy body. Well, if you have an eating disorder, I'm telling you, your health is just, it's not if, it's when it's going to catch up
Mhm.
with you. It
Totally.
will. I
Mm.
promise, right? You know better
Oh,
than anyone as a doctor.
100%.
It's coming. And you may
100%.
think, oh, I'm fine now, but then it's going to hit like it did for me. Like,
Mhm.
whoa, what is all of this?
Yeah.
Right. So knowing, like, no, that doesn't line up with that. My family's important to me. Okay. How does your eating disorder line up with that? It doesn't,
Mhm.
because we know the eating disorder filters everything. So
Mhm.
you're planning a family dinner, you're having a holiday meal, your eating disorder is right there trying to figure out
Mhm.
how to have the least amount of calories, or are you going to secretly eat, in privacy because you don't want people to see what you're eating. It hovers over everything. So it actually is stealing moments from your family.
Yeah.
So just concisely, asking, if you continue this, what is your life going to look like into the future? And then looking at what is truly important to you and asking yourself, now, how does my eating disorder align with this?
Yeah, great questions. And it's so insightful when you start answering those questions for yourself and really dive deep without judgment. It's like that's the big thing, is like really just understanding yourself and what do you want your life to look like? And that I remember asking myself that question when I was 25, and I'm like, I don't want to live like this. I don't know how. Like, you don't need to know the how. I think that's what it is. You get stuck in the how, but it's like, what do you want and why? And then the how figures itself out. And a lot of times too, it's like when you have that support, when you can get in contact with people who have been through this, that's how the how works itself out. You don't have to worry about that. But sometimes, especially when you're a high achiever perfectionist, you think you have to have everything figured out right
Right.
now you get so overwhelmed and then you paralyze action. And that's the worst thing you can do. So it is just taking those small steps. And I love those questions you ask. It's like for anyone who's listening and this is resonating with you, start asking yourself those questions, write things out. It clears your head to really bring it to reality. Because sometimes we get so stuck in our head of like how we're thinking and the patterns. But when you write things out and you look at it, or maybe revisit it a week from now, you'd be like, wow, okay, I see this more clearly.
100%. And if you knew how to do it, you would not be in this position. So
Mhm.
it's okay that you don't know how. And with bulimia specifically, your mind will get really stuck on, right, Kelly? The how do I stop the
Mhm.
binging and purging? How
Mhm.
do I stop that piece? And when
Mhm.
I went into, and I'd come up with all these ways that I was going to stop doing this, and
Mhm.
obviously none of them worked.
Yeah.
Um, in those moments when the compulsion would hit, I would figure out a way, and nothing was necessarily going to stop me.
Mhm.
So it wasn't when I went into recovery, it wasn't until then that I realized, oh wait, I got to address this whole Weight Watchers restriction thing. And I
Yeah.
remember telling my therapist, like, huh?
Mhm.
You know, because that really shocked me. Like I
Yeah.
needed to give up that part, and that may
Yeah.
seem obvious for some people, but it wasn't to me.
Mhm.
For her to tell me you need to stop counting Weight Watcher points was like, huh?
Yeah.
So I'm just, that's a good example of, I thought I just needed to figure out how to stop the binging and purging, and I would be like free of all this. And
Mhm.
then I realized, oh, wait, there's also this restriction piece. And
Mhm.
why am I so glued into this? Oh, there's beliefs under that about how I'm loved and valued. Oh, yeah, there's some trauma I didn't even know I needed to deal with. Like it just started to unfold in a way that
Mhm.
you cannot possibly figure it out, in my opinion, all on your own. Maybe you can figure out some, but
Mhm.
all of it to be completely free, I think, is super hard.
Yeah.
Now you did it. You didn't seek help, and you figured out how to do it.
Yeah, it honestly though, in hindsight, it took me years. Like I would have been able to get my life back on track much quicker if I had sought help.
Yeah,
I'm just that's one of my limiting beliefs that I've had to overcome is I don't receive help. I do everything on my own. I'm fiercely independent. It like this is something I've had to work through is like I felt like it was a sign of weakness if I sought help. And now I don't believe that. I know that's not true. It's actually it's a sign of strength when you do seek help. And, but that, for anyone, even though I was able to do it on my own, I don't recommend it because I know I could have gotten things back on track quicker if I had
yeah,
gotten more support.
yeah.
So,
Great
yeah.
point.
hmm there's something you said I wanted to go back to. Oh,
Like,
but
what's that? Probably
I
skipped
know.
ahead and you lost it.
Oh, it's okay. I know. Oh, and maybe it'll come back to me. But yeah, I was just trying to think of I'll have to one thing I did want to ask you because kind of wrapping up, but I want to ask you because this is something I find that a lot of people and I had struggled with this myself is that oftentimes when we're like perfectionists, we're also people pleasers. And so we want to make everybody and everything okay around us. So we often self-sacrifice ourselves in the process. And being a mother going through that, can you talk about your experience of oftentimes we'll put our kids before us even and kind of let
Mhm.
ourselves suffer. Can you talk about how your own recovery was actually putting your child first because you were a better mom for your child?
100%. I was placing him in first position when I went into recovery because I knew that anytime we went out to eat, we went to an amusement park, anything, my eating disorder was right there trying to, in my head, manage the food, calculate things, try to prevent a binge and purge, all this kind of stuff. And it removed me from the moments with him.
Mm,
Right. And to this day, if when I think about it, it makes me sad because I really did miss moments with my son as he was a young boy because my eating disorder took root about when he was about 6 months to a year old.
mhm,
And, so by going into recovery, I knew I wanted to change for him. And he was one of my biggest motivations,
mhm,
to change. And he'll say to this day, Mom, I remember like thinking, I wonder why my mom has to eat like that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember
Yeah.
thinking that way because we'd go like to go get something to eat and you would try to make sure it was small or eliminate certain things or always have a special order or no sauce. And he's like, I just remember like thinking, why does she have to do that? And just a young little boy, because, I went into recovery when he was 7.
Yeah.
So, choosing recovery not only is lifting the veil so you can be present with your kiddos, it
Mhm.
is also showing them and being a good example for them, right? With your relationship with food and body. I'll
Mhm.
often tell my moms, when I'm working with their daughters specifically, one of the best things you can do is work on healing your own relationship with food and body to be a good example for your daughter. Because even though you may not have an eating disorder, but you're following a keto diet, your daughter sees this,
Mhm. Oh my gosh,
for example,
totally.
right? So,
Mhm.
yes, the people pleasing part, that like any of our traits, they can be used as assets or liabilities.
Mhm.
And with that trait, you can use it in a realm to say, I want to be better for my kiddos,
Mhm.
right? And my children,
Yep.
and in a way that is pleasing
Mhm.
because you're moving into a more positive relationship with them and with yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so true. Those subconscious messages we receive, it's like we can hear someone can say, do this, don't do that. But then when you see them doing something, especially someone who's so impressionable as like a parent, it leaves a lasting impression when you see that. And you're like, okay, I guess this is how I'm supposed to eat. I guess this is how I'm supposed to view my body. And it really does leave that impression. So it is such a gift to our families when you start to
Yeah.
get yourself in a healing place and start making those changes. So thank you for sharing that because I find that's also often like, I wasn't a mother at the time of my eating disorder, but I can imagine that would just very much complicate it. And when you can bring some clarity to that no, your healing is going to be the best gift for your child, I imagine it makes such a difference in pushing you forward and continuing on with that when, especially as a mom, you want to do everything for your children. So thank you
Oh,
for
and
sharing that.
you're welcome. And it has such a beautiful timeline in my story because when I decided I wanted to go get certified, and I have 4 certifications, that was my first certification, and I shared it with my son. At that time, he was like 15, 16 years old. And I
Mhm.
remember him like, I'm so proud of you, mom. And like, he just felt so proud that
Oh,
I had gone on this journey, but I was turning it around to now help other people. And so my relationship with my son throughout it is such like a rewarding, beautiful place because
mhm,
him finding me shifted me. He's been a great cheerleader for me along the way. And
mhm,
even to this day, supports me and wants to hear about things. I know we're at the end of the podcast, so I'll bring up too
mhm,
this course
mhm.
that I've just launched. And the segue is my son has been very supportive and testing out things for me and
Aw,
doing
that's
stuff for me on the
awesome.
technology end.
Aw.
But you know her, Merritt Elizabeth. She's my
Mhm,
really good friend. She's a fellow certified eating disorder coach. And last year over dinner, we were like, we want to do something together. And we both have the lived experience of bulimia. We are both recovered. And as you start to look for resources on bulimia, you will actually be shocked
mhm.
that there's not a lot out
Right.
there. It
Mhm.
oftentimes gets lumped together also with anorexia and binge eating. You can find resources for specifically anorexia and specifically binge eating, but there's this gap. So Merritt and I set out. It became a labor of love
Mhm.
over the next 10 months, and we created the course that is called Conquering Bulimia. It is an online private self-paced course just for bulimia. We have over 70 videos in the course that are divided out between mind, body, spirit. Also, we have experts that have joined us in the field of eating disorders throughout. We give all our best coaching tips, our personal lived experience stories, and in addition, how to keep moving forward in recovery. So we really see this as a tool that can help jumpstart recovery. So if someone's listening right now, they've heard us talking all about bulimia,
Yeah.
Kelly, and the shame and the isolation and the persona we show to the world, and you're thinking right now, that's me. This may be a good way to just jumpstart your recovery and start to dive in on your own terms, right? And in a place you can feel comfortable with. The other goal for Merritt and I was to make something affordable. Eating disorder recovery in general can be on the expensive side. So we wanted to create something that most people can afford.
Mhm.
And so again, that's at conqueringbulimia.com. You can check us out if you want to. We'd love to be a resource to help people, whether you're beginning your journey as a jumpstart, as I just said, you're in it, you need additional resources, whatever it might be.
Mhm. I love that. And like I said, I wish this existed 20 years ago, but I love that you're doing it now because there are so many people who may listen to this and really don't even know where to turn, don't want to jump full force into something, or it feels very scary. And like this is just a great thing that you have set up. And I highly recommend, you're amazing, Merit's amazing. So
Thank
just
you.
amazing resources and people to help you along the process. And just absolutely love what you guys put together, and the fact too that it's self-paced. It's like, because again, when you're going through that, it's like it can feel so daunting when if you're in a group setting or you have to disclose things, or you're getting pinned into answering questions that you don't feel ready to answer, and that all evokes stress response. So the fact that it's a self-paced course gives you the resources for you to uncover things at your own pace, and I love that. So
That's
highly
right.
recommend that. I'm going to put the link in the show notes for anyone who wants to connect with you guys and dive into that course. And also, where else can they find you?
So they can find me also. My website is Sarah Lee Recovery. So if you're interested in learning more about one-on-one coaching, and you can find me there. I do have my Facebook business page, but as we just said earlier, I'm under a bit of a shadow ban right now because I talked about bulimia. But you
Mhm.
can find me on there. I do post and share on there. And then, in addition, of course, the Conquering Bulimia, which you'll add below.
Mhm.
But even when my caseload is full, and my schedule can't allow for any more one-on-one because I'm one of the more tenured certified coaches, my network is vast. So I happily volunteer to help people match up with a good coach for them. So don't be afraid to reach out, whether it's me or somebody else you want to work with, if one-on-one coaching is something you desire.
I love that. Yeah. And what a great, just having that resource and just somebody in your corner who understands it. And there's so many, like we said, so many little nuances to especially bulimia, that when you have someone who's lived and breathed it, they're going to understand you in such a way that no one else could. So highly recommend that. I'm going to put all your contact information in the show notes too. So definitely reach out to Sarah, get the resources, dive into the course, and really take this as your nudge from the universe that here's your time to take care of yourself, get your life back, and start being present for the moments that you don't want to watch pass you by anymore. So thank you, Sarah. This has just been such an amazing conversation. I love it. And I am so excited to share this episode out to everyone because I really think many people are going to resonate with it. So thank you.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me on, Kelly.
Absolutely. And again, if you're listening to this, share this with someone who you may think may benefit from it. Sometimes, especially if you have a friend, it maybe doesn't hit when you say it to them, or may feel a little uncomfortable for you to say something if you think they're struggling. But sometimes when you share an episode, it may be just the thing they need to hear to move themselves in the right direction. So please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And thank you again for everyone who's listening today.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending your precious time to listen to this episode of Rewiring Health. My mission is to inspire hope and healing through science-backed practices. If you found value in this, please share with 3 people and leave a review. By doing so, this message can be spread to those who need to hear it most. Also, to get updates on the most recent episodes, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for being part of this community, and I am forever grateful for you.